Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The Shona have a saying that kukocha kunoda kwamai umwana kunodzima moto, which roughly translated means it's okay for the mother to roast the maize on the fire, but when the child is doing it, the mother will accuse the child of putting out the fire. I remember this saying, adage, from my school days. We had a book of Shona's sayings and adages, and it was illustrated with that cartoon, with the mother beating off the child. When it's happening at a national level, to the sickening extent of what is happening in Zimbabwe, there really is cause for concern. Emmerson Mnangagwa has just held his politburo meeting, and the headlines in Blue 24 was Mnangagwa reads the Riot Act to the Zanu PF politburo members. He was accusing his fellow Zanu PF leaders of factionalism, of disturbing the unity and stability of the country with their factionalism and disregard of the party rules. Here is an individual who has disregarded the rules blatantly, again and again, now pretending that he is a trickster on the rule of law. He is concerned about the stability and unity in the country. This is not the first time, of course. The first time Zanu PF pulled this stunt is soon after independence in 1983. The infamous Gukurahundi massacre was ostensibly launched in the name of stamping out the dissidents, were causing political instability, and therefore threatening the peace and development of the country. In reality, Mugabe launched Gukurahundi to force PF Zapu, the only other party that had a real chance of challenging Zanu PF and wresting power from the regime. The two parties had tried unity accords and they had failed in the past because of the mistrust between the two parties. After independence, Mugabe saw his chance in 1983. Gukurahundi was primarily to coerce PF Zapu to give up their political independence and join up with Zanu PF, which they finally did in 1987 by signing the Unity Accords. And this cleared the deck for Mugabe to impose the de facto one-party state, which has ruled the country to this day. During elections, oppositions were accused of disturbing, threatening the peace in the country, the development in the country. And that was used as cover to justify the regime dissenting on the opposition with a sledgehammer. Of course, it was all nonsense. There was no such thing as peace in the country. All Zanu PF wanted to do is to make sure that they remain the only force, the only ruling party in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was to be a de facto one-party state, and all opposition was ruthlessly dealt with. There is growing unease in Zanu PF itself, because Mnangagwa has been disregarding the party structures, form his own structures. All these groupings, teachers for ED, gold partners for ED, religious leaders for ED, and so forth and so on, were to sideline the party structures to consolidate his own power. And any faction in Zanu PF threatening his position, he accuses them of factionalism. And yet he is the godfather of factionalism. He is the godfather of lawlessness. He just doesn't want anybody to threaten his position. He wants to retain power at all costs. And so you use every excuse to crush his opponents in the name of the law, while he is breaking the law to promote his own interests. Mnangagwa blatantly rigged last year's elections. We should never forget that. He squandered up to $5 billion in bribes of one form or another. From bribing Povo with boxes of chicken in, chips, and a piece of chicken, and a soft drink, to attend Zanu PF rallies, to bribing judges, all of them, with US $400,000 given as housing loan. Of course, everybody knew none of them were expected to repay that loan. Even SADC, the regional body, and the AU dismissed Zimbabwe's 2023 elections as flawed. And yet here is the same individual now pretending that he is the one upholding the rule of law, holds on unity in Zimbabwe and political stability and economic development. We really have to deal with this problem in Zimbabwe. This is a typical tyrant trick where he reads the Riot Act to everybody else. And meanwhile, placing himself above the law. He's a law to himself. One of these fine days, Zimbabwe should revisit and write a democratic constitution. And given our experience, I think we must have a standalone clause in that new constitution stating clearly that no one is above the law. That is us applying what we've learned from experience to correct our own situation. Mnangagwa is not interested in unity, in political stability, even within his own party. He's roughing them up in the interest of retaining power at all costs. And of course, if he can rough up his own fellow Zanu PF members, one can only imagine how ruthless he is with those outside the party. We saw this graphically illustrated in the 2008 elections. We should never forget that. So in closing my presentation today, I just want to play a video clip of what happened actually in 2008. And Mnangagwa himself boasting of his role in those elections. Thank you very much for listening.
2008 padakaita ma elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya president. Ma results abuda tiripa party headquarters vamutasa vangari secretary vedu ve administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komo gwenda kwarusapi seka maresults achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo Mnangagwa ndezvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose vatofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvinhu gadzirai chi cabinet. Asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusuru, we know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
The tragedy for Zimbabwe is that those tragic events of 2008 were to lead to the formation of the 2008 to 2013 Government of National Unity, whose primary purpose was to implement the democratic reforms to make sure that the blatant cheating that happened in the March vote and the wanton violence during the runoff that year in 2008 would never be repeated again. There will be rule of law in Zimbabwe, and no one will be above the law. Alas, Mugabe bribed Morgan Tsvangirai and company, and they failed to implement even one token reform in 5 years of the GNU. And so at the end of the GNU, the nation found itself stuck with the same corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF. And the buffoon who was behind the electoral coup in 2008 is now president. And in typical tyrannical, dictatorial arrogance, he wants to continue to impose himself on the nation in the name of unity and stability. It is not for Mnangagwa to be reading the Riot Act to the nation. We should be reading the Riot Act to him. Mnangagwa is never going to give up power. And that is the reality we have got to face. We wasted the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU. The MDC, CCC have been participating in flawed elections ever since, knowing fully well that doing so will give Zanu PF legitimacy and thus perpetuate the dictatorship. We have got to have the good sense to realize that this circus is never going to end. Now that Zanu PF and MDC CCC are working together, what we have got to learn from the history of the last 15 years is that it is sheer futile insanity to keep participating in flawed elections just to give Zanu PF legitimacy. We are not going to get any meaningful reforms implemented. I don't see Zanu PF doing it, and I don't see the few CCC MPs and senators pushing for any meaningful reforms. So come 2028, we will have Zanu PF holding these elections with not even one token reform implemented. And no doubt, Nelson Chamisa will relaunch a new party and promise that this time the party is going to win. And he has plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes to entice us to participate. As long as we participate and give the regime legitimacy, we cannot stop this circus. The only hope to end this circus is stop participating in flawed elections. The SADC report, the AU report, condemned last year's elections as flawed and illegal. How could we continue participating in an election in which there isn't something even as basic as a verified voters roll? The biggest belief. We really need to learn. We can't keep on this circus pretending that we don't know what is going on. We do know what is going on. How is it possible that in this day and age, people don't even know what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections? That is simply unbelievable. We really need to end this circus. Zimbabwe is a failed state, and we are sinking deeper and deeper into the abyss, all because we failed to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Yes, this reading of the Riot Act is a party affair, but we know that while he reads the Riot Act to his own fellow Zanu PF members, when it comes to us, the ordinary civilians, he is prepared to kill just to retain power. Zanu PF can be stopped if we do not participate in flawed elections in 2028. Because if we had done so in last year's elections, I am convinced that SADC would have denied Zanu PF political legitimacy. They did not, because millions of ordinary Zimbabweans participated in the flawed elections. We must stop shooting ourselves in the foot. It is us who should be reading the Riot Act to Mnangagwa, and not the other way around. Thank you very much for joining me today. Unfortunately, this evening, 7 o'clock UK time, we will not be having any broadcast, but we'll start again tomorrow. The usual time, 7 o'clock UK time and 8 o'clock Zimbabwe time. Thank you and have a nice day.